So now we're going to our final speaker. Sue England is based in Munich and is qualified as a lawyer in the UK. She studied in the UK and Belgium and has worked in 4 different countries around the world. She later taught human rights law and EU, European Union law, at 2 UK universities. Sue is an active member of Women's Declaration International and also runs a series of seminars on human rights law for non-lawyers. Everybody's welcome to attend on Zoom and they're free, and we've put the links into the chat and we'll put them into the YouTube so you can follow those if you want to. Sue's going to talk about the state of global demographics. So thank you very much, Sue, and over to you.
So a real sort of umbrella view of the situation with global demographics, because this is very important at the moment to all sorts of things that are going on, attitudes towards birth rates, attitudes then towards contraception, attitudes towards what in reality countries do to help women and the families around them support children, or support the children who are not in families, and also in many countries this question now of attacks on abortion and things such as that. So this is to give you a real overview of what the situation actually is at the moment in statistical terms. So it's useful when you go to demography to know what the demographers talk about, because obviously they have a certain amount of esoteric jargon. They're always going on about the total fertility rate. What is that in their statistics? The number of babies that a woman has in her lifetime. So, in other words, the average number of children a woman in a country has, the TFR. They're always talking about this, and I'm going to be talking about it. They also talk about the demographic transition. And this is, in fact, what is happening in the world and has been happening for the last 200 years or so, which means the human species, through its women, are having far fewer children per woman. It kicked off in the early 1800s in Europe and indeed in the US. It's going on all over the world, but in other parts of the world, it's gone much, much faster. So particularly from the Second World War onwards. You'd be interested to see that the current global fertility rate is 2.428, let's not worry about that, births per woman. And it's going down all the time, for example, 0.41 since last year. So when you think of lots of women still having very large numbers of children, that is balanced against the fact that all over the world it's going down, and some countries it's very low now. Replacement level fertility that they talk about is the average number of children, and they always put it as women must have to replace the population for the next generation. So you'll see them always bouncing on about this idea, this figure 2.1. So basically every woman has to have 2 children and a little bit extra on average for slippage, unfortunately. Children who die, children don't reach breeding age. And then if every woman in a society country is having 2.1 children, you're going to replace the population. What you do around that, whether there's lots of immigration, whether people are living longer, whether people are living shorter, that also has an impact on the figures. But they're talking about what they're expecting women to do as part of this, have 2.1 children on average at least to replace the population. All this is endlessly calculated on women. Sometimes, I feel like saying to them, could we just hold it here? Now, I don't know if anybody's told you, but when the mummy bear and the baby and the male man bear, the father bear, love one another very much, that's when our babies come along. Okay, but they always just talk about women somehow having children, sort of regardless of what's happening with the males of the population. Okay, births are actually in any society are about ultimately the economic situation in the society. That's what's actually going on. What's been the impact of COVID? Well, all over the world, it's pushing the fertility rate down, except in some countries where access to contraception and safe abortion has been very badly affected by COVID. I mean, one could predict that. So there will be some countries where the effect is actually to push it up, but generally it's down. So here, for example, the US, when COVID kicked in 2020, a lot less births compared to the year before COVID. And now the US birth rate is at an all-time low. It was going down, but this is pushing it further. In the UK, the same thing. The total fertility rate was going down since 2014 anyway, but now it's gone down further, 1.55. As you can see, that's well below reproduction rate, replacement rate. India, in fact, is having 2 children per woman now. It varies a lot from area to area in India, but that's where it is now. That's below reproduction rate. But the global population will be 8 billion in November this year. To put all this in perspective, it's going up still a lot. So looking at it a bit more detail historically, since 1950, when on average globally women had 4.7 children, it's now, as of this year, 2.428 throughout the world. As you can see, that is nearly halving it, and the trajectory is down. Despite that, because people are living longer, we're looking at the world population peaking 2080s to 2090s, 1.5 billion. So that's another 2.5 billion on what we're going to have in November. That's a lot. That's another 25, 30%, isn't it, on 8 billion. Let's look at some of the general important trends. They used to not ask the men or calculate figures on men, but it's clear that certainly in developed countries, more men than women don't want to have children at the moment. The whole population is going off having children, but women particularly, but men also an awful lot. More men than women in developed countries, if you ask them, say they don't want children. It's increasing. Not having children is increasing for both sexes. You could, many countries now, it'll be 15% of women who say they don't want children. It can be 20% for men in the same population, and both figures are going up. Also, looking at, because then countries always looking at it from the point of what's happening in our country, okay? There's about 200 countries in the world. They're reckoning that by 2050, 151 countries in the world will have this total fertility rate lower than the replication rate of 2.1. And in 2100, it will be 183 countries out of the 200 in the world. That's how things are changing so much. And we're now here just picking on South Korea, but South Korea was the first major country in the world, where I think this is 2021, they're having less than 1 child per woman. And other countries are following too. That's a big, big change and happening very rapidly. South Korea's and many other Southeast Asian countries, the birth rates dropped hugely, very fast. Vital global facts about all this. Birth rates vary with economic changes. They always have done. Actually, the economic situation in your country is a lot more important than your cultural ideas and all these other factors. Obviously, you may have a very high birth rate and then the economy sours a bit and the birth rate goes down, but it's still much higher than South Korea. But still, it's the economy that pushes these things. Human beings are normally fairly sensible, and they have children when they can afford them and manage to look after them. Vital also to understand, when women have children older, this massively reduces fertility. You simply haven't got so long as a woman to produce lots of children. And of course, all around the world, normally the age at which women are having the first child is going up quite a lot. I think in the, in the UK and some places now, most women are not having children until they're 30. This is a huge change. Of course, increase in life expectancy hugely affects your population size. So for most countries, the population increases is mainly now based on the fact that people are just living much longer. So every time they have a census, you're still there to be counted in because you're still alive. You didn't die when you were 55. The abortion rate, it's a very important factor, of course, for women, whatever circumstances there are, is not affected by legality. Women have abortions, whether it's legal or not. And this has been proved time and time again. The main change with abortion, for example, because a lot of people are sort of somehow saying, women aren't having enough babies, we must stop abortion, Well, the only thing that happens, the difference between legal and illegal abortion is that when it's illegal, more women die and more orphans are created because many, many women are having abortions when they've already had children. It's not confined to younger women or unmarried women, for example. And also a new trend, a very important new trend, because we've been living sort of in a world perhaps for 50 years where life expectancy in general has been going up and up and up. Now, for example, in the US and the UK, life expectancy is actually reducing for poor people. It may be increasing on average still, because the bulk of the population is better off and their life expectancy is going up. But we've now hit in the Western world a situation where life expectancy of the poor is actually reducing. Other vital global facts: more education for women always affects the birth rate downwards. It doesn't matter what culture, what religious traditions, what the level of that, what the state of that education system it is. Women are getting better educated all around the world, and this always affects the birth rate downwards. Next, all over the world and also within individual countries, people are moving from rural areas into the cities. Cities are getting lots more bigger cities, lots more depopulated rural areas. It's more exciting, more expensive to have children in the big cities. You can offer them more. It costs you more to offer them more. People are having smaller families for that reason all around the world. Also, in many developed countries now, even poorer people from working classes are modeling the middle classes. And instead of leaving it to the state, say, to educate their children, they feel they should put a lot of extra resources into the children that they have. And this is another reason for pushing the birth rate down. Have 1 or 2 children and spend a lot of money and time on educating them and getting them into a better position in life. And of course, if more men and women don't want children, the theory, well, then if you're going to keep this reproduction rate up, the ones who do want them are going to have more. They're not having more. So as the number of people not having children sort of eats into the general mass of the population, you are reducing the number of children that are being born. So to have more children, as many politicians want us to do and pressure us to do and endlessly talk to us about as it's a problem, if we don't stop this reduction in the number of children being born, each woman, is seriously against the global trend. It's completely against the global trend. So we have to bear that in mind. As soon as states start endlessly talking about increasing birth rates, what's this going to mean for women? Now, a postage stamp. Okay. Sudden change of, or not all that black and white print. Okay, this is from 1989, when the Germans celebrated the fact that they were the first country in the world in 1889 to bring in pensions for everybody, Rentenversicherung. Okay, so I love this because it's a very nice example of what's happened in more developed countries, using these little graphs, these little Christmas tree graphs that all the demographers use. So I'm just pointing them out because they're interesting to look at, but you'll see them whenever you go on Wiki anywhere, look at demographics for your country, anything, they use these and they're quite useful. So going down, you see age. Going across, you see the number of people in that particular 10-year slot in your population, and divided between men and women. So what you see on the left is an absolute classic situation that most countries go through, and what Germany and other European countries, probably America too, were going through 120 years ago. A lot of children being born, and then throughout each 10 years you go up through the system. Some people die, okay? And people being in their 80s is fairly rare. 1989 in Germany shows how people are living much longer, particularly women, but how the birth rate is dropping. We've now got sort of more like deciduous trees instead of Christmas trees, okay? Much smaller groups at the bottom, the children being born, and then lots of people living much longer and making a bigger population. 2020 was a projection, actually, but it was reasonably accurate at the time. So there also you can see the effect of wars or huge instability in countries. There you can see, just under the age of 40, you can see the effects of the Second World War on Germany, and you can see the effect of the First World War later on. So that's just the basics of these things, but it's useful to show how demography is changing. This is a very developed Western European country, but all countries are going through this too, in their own ways and at their own pace. And so just to give you one example of a country where we are still in full Christmas tree bauble mode, this is Nigeria as of 2017. So this is currently at the other end of the scale. Still, very large numbers of children being born, and then throughout life, an attrition rate, very few people reaching 80 in that country. But showing how there's a completely different trajectory in Nigeria. It is going to become, I think it's the third largest country, in the fourth or fifth most populous country in the world, unlike European countries where our populations are reducing. The projections are from now to 200 million, 2010, probably something like 700 to 750 million people on this basis. Now, as you know, the demographers are always making projections for us about what's going on. New estimates from 2020, when they were already aware, obviously, that COVID had started, suggesting that the global population increase will continue to slow. It's slowing down, even though the population is increasing. The increase is slowing due to the education of women and more access to contraception being the primary things. Well, will this be enough, really, to stop this huge population explosion? It's not looking good at the moment. Both these things are in the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which the UN and the many countries around the world have been working on for 40 years or so. An awful lot has been done, but they're seriously off track. So at this stage, in 2000, the demographers looking at this said that this is a big shame. If we had done what we said we will do globally through these Sustainable Development Goals, we would have massively reduced the increase in the population. We could have, instead of been looking at something like 10.5 billion in 2100, we would have been looking at 6.29, which would be a massive reduction on what we have now this year, 8 billion, okay? So this shows what's going on in the world, and it shows the power of actually educating women and giving them contraception. It has a huge impact on birth rates. And here, unfortunately, it is impacting on birth rates, but nothing like as much as it could possibly have done. If, as they're saying, if the world had done what they said they actually wanted to do, okay? So we are still manifestly failing on women's education and access to contraception under these goals, but that is the impact that it's having on the world population growth. And another really important thing, and actually this is the major take home from this today. I've only got, this is my second from last slide, you'd be pleased to know. Again, when they were looking at all these what the demographers work and all the various projections they're making. There's lots of projections being made and you end up sort of averaging them, okay? This is from the Global Burden of Disease Study, unfortunately it's called. But anyway, this is just pure demographics. They also admitted in 2020, we are getting this is all getting increasingly unsustainable what we're doing, because now we're all flying blind. All the work that's been done on demographics in the past was based on populations where the women were having more than 2.1 children. Obviously, sometimes considerably more, but in a lot of European countries, perhaps for a long time, around that figure. So women were reproducing the population. They were having these 2.1 or more children. And everything we analyze and discuss and try and predict is based on that. Having less than 2.1 children is unheard of for the human species. So how is this impacting on cultures, countries, economics, the relationships between men and women, everything which affects the birth rate? Well, we really are guessing now because we've never been in that situation before. We've never had a South Korea. Indeed, we've never had a UK where you're only producing 1.55 children per woman. So when you look at any of these projections, you have to bear that in mind. Women are confounding the demographers, and some of them are now willing to actually admit it. But you, like in this one here, you find it on page like 16 of this report, not in the headlines at the beginning. So that's another really important way in which demographics is changing. The demographers don't really know how to model any of this anymore. So finally, let's sort of look at some of this globally again. And again, these are forecasts. It's predicted that by 2010, the TFR for women throughout the world will be 1.66. As we know, at the moment, it's 2.4-ish. So this is a massive reduction. Again, continuing. Sorry, I just had to turn my screen off. And it's going to make a massive shift in the balance of power throughout the world. India, later on this year, next year or the year after, is going to become the largest, have the largest population of any country in the world. Currently, it's China, which is at 1.4 billion. but China is going to drop massively. India is going to continue to increase. So next year or the year after, it will become the largest country in the world for population. As you can see, here's another projection, slightly more. Nigeria will be going up to 791 million. China is going to drop, they think, by about half, 48%. And it's actually beginning this year. China's population is beginning to go down massively because Chinese women now, whatever you say to them and whatever rules you put in around them, are having fewer and fewer children. And they're now down to something to 1.2 per woman. And every time they've relaxed the rules in the last 7 years and said Chinese women can have more children, every year they've had less. So that's the way Chinese women are looking at it. So in 2100, you're looking at China being 732 million on most of the projections. That's a massive drop. And also what's happening, because we are actually having fewer children, even though the population is still going up in many parts of the world, partly because of increasing life expectancy. This is happening in a lot of countries still. I mean, you know, most countries' life expectancy is going up. We have a shifting age structure. So there are going to be, by 2100, 2.37 billion older people, that's 65 years or older, and we're going to have 1.7 billion who are actually younger than 20, and that is going to be a massive change round as well. This is always presented as a problem. I don't really see why. And that's a subject for massive debate. But we know in so many countries, so many experts, so many politicians, they're always saying that women having fewer children is a problem. Is it or isn't it? I'm not trying to answer that now, but I can tell you they are having fewer children, and we are going to be dealing with that. And women are doing this. Women are changing the world.